thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and thank you so much for travelling all the way from the Shire to be with us today.
Problem.
I appreciate you. So, classic question that we kick off with: what is your superpower, and why is it important to you?
So my superpower is patience. And I think it's important because I've recognized that if I have patience with people, then it tends to bring the best out of them. Like, it gives them the space for them and the permission for them to be their best self, for them to feel like they'll be forgiven for, you know, taking a chance and it not being right, because I'm there and I'm patient and I'm listening to them and I'm giving them that space. So I think it's my superpower because of what it brings out of other people, and then also what it brings out of myself, because if I'm patient with myself, I'm also a bit forgiving with myself, then I find I'm able to do more things that I didn't think I was able to do.
Amazing. I love that you're associating patience with risk, because I don't think that's often, those two things are not often paired, but you're saying the more patient I'm with people, the more they can almost jump off a cliff and know that it's okay when you get to the other side.
Yes.
And we had a really interesting discussion to get to patience. How did you feel during that process? And also, obviously, you've had a bit of time to reflect since then. Have you seen this show up in your day-to-day?
Yes, I have. I think it's interesting. I've always seen myself as someone who probably was strong when it came to emotional regulation, which I think is related to patience. It's like the ability to, you know, manage your own emotions, and then how you show up. So I think that word had come out before, but then I hadn't laddered it up almost to that elevation level that is patience. And I think that encompasses more, and I really like that.
Amazing. Can we talk about emotional regulation just to start there? Because I think it's my new favourite topic, because I didn't know what it was about 2 years ago. And now I see it all the time when people don't know how to emotionally regulate. There's almost a little tick in me that goes, oh,
yes,
you're not there yet, which was probably myself 2 years ago. What does emotional regulation look like for you, and how have you've obviously been a big part of your life, so I'm keen to hear more there.
I think it's something, for me, it's almost the time it takes. Everyone has an emotional reaction to things initially. For me, it's the time and the ability to stop and bring in almost the rational brain a little bit so that you can have the response you want to have to the situation. And I think I'm able to manage that quite well and recognize when other people really need you to do that as well. It's almost like your first brain is about to fire back, and the ability to stop and recognize that and then have a think about what your actual response should be. So I think it's almost like the time and the shortcut you can take for that part of your brain to click in and go, hang on a second, is that going to get the best result? Or can you phrase that a different way? And can you make the person feel like you really heard them or listened to them?
Yeah, one of my best friends is a psychologist. She describes the emotional brain, the rational brain, and then when they cross over, that's when you're in your wise mind.
Yes.
And how we tap into our wise mind more. But I think so many of us are being led with emotion without even realizing it's necessarily emotion. And the more we can take a step back and name how we're feeling about different things, that sounds so basic, doesn't it? But I swear I'm going to be 35 in December, and I've only just learned to kind of start doing that properly. Has that been something you've done your whole life?
I mean, like everyone else, I'm evolving and I'm growing, so I probably do it more now than I ever did before, and I'm in my early 40s now. But I'd say I did get a bit of a head start on it because my dad was very good at this. And I recognised that quite early on, that he was someone, when you're watching the world and you're learning the world from your parents, I recognised very on that he got a lot of respect from people. He seemed to be the person in the family that everyone would come to talk to. He would be a really good listener. He would never push something on people. He would almost wait for people to help people and guide them to get there. And I really recognised, and I could see that as a young child, and I was like, he's got something there that's really valuable. And so probably through both nature and nurture, I had a bit of a head start on that.
Yeah, and that patience with other people.
Yes.
I love that. what are the moments where your patience has been tested in your life? Because I feel like I love your facial expression here, but it's a hard. I don't have any patience. So your biggest superpower is my biggest weakness. I have none. Like you just said, the language around try not to push things on people. Oh, it kind of cut me a bit because I was like, I'm very pushy.
Yeah.
So yeah, keen to discuss that.
I mean, definitely my children are the time and place that has absolutely pushed my patience, and I'm just like everyone else. I've absolutely hit the wall when, you know, with young children. I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and so I've been through some pretty full-on years the last few years. So definitely that space, and I found myself absolutely hit the wall with my children, and you feel yourself tipping over the edge. And it's exactly what you said before. I don't always get it right, but it's if I can bring in that rational mind to just stop me for a second before I react, I will get a better response and a better outcome with my kids rather than just coming fully at the emotional level and tipping over the edge. So, but I'm by no means perfect with it and definitely still learning.
I love that that's a good message for all of our parents listening, that even the most patient people who patience is their superpower, children can
I can't
still
do it all the time. No, absolutely. There's no perfection in it either. It might be a strength, but there's no one who's perfect, I think.
Yeah. For someone like me, who I would put patience as my biggest weakness, I've got 3 biggest weaknesses, and patience is like up there, maybe number 1 or number 2. What advice would you have for me around trying to become a more patient person?
I think I'd say you probably almost are getting some benefits from the flip of it. So you've probably built your career and you've built your time almost on being, you know, a gung-ho and being able to run at things and make them happen. And so my advice would be, how do you find a version of yourself that both keeps the things that make that magic, because you don't want to dull that down, and yet brings more patience in, and you know, almost what's that second version of yourself that keeps what makes you brilliant, probably your own superpower, but then also manages to bring in some patience, which means you'll get even more out of the people around you. There's no probably magic to it, but it's almost, if you can see it as keeping everything that makes you amazing and building something extra, I think you're more likely to get there, rather than if you see it as taking some of your superpower and dulling it down to become more patient.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Like, the one thing that I've learned, which I think is slightly making me more patient, is the importance of validating people's feelings. Again, I'm going to sound very basic here, but like,
Yes.
I'm such a solution orientated person that someone gives me a problem and I'm like, right, what are we going to do about this? Okay, who can I introduce you to? How can we make this work? And one of my friends is incredible at just like stopping in the empathy and going, that must be really tough. I'm sorry to hear that, before even kind of continuing with the conversation. And it's been a skill that I've had to harness over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I found it quite game changing in terms of taking the kind of pressure off of people and making them feel really seen and really heard. Like, you have a very calming presence to be in this studio. Like, this studio is quite scary, right? But
Yeah.
but it's quite, you've got a lovely calming presence to be around. You mentioned listening. What are the other kind of key things that come out with patience?
I guess there's elements of control, but I think it's also respect. It's respecting people. When you're patient with them, you're respecting that they're going to get there themselves, or that you're going to help build with them, as opposed to push the way through. I think it's the signal you send to the people around you that if you respect them, if you're able to be patient with them. But linking back to what you just said as well, it made me think, I think patience definitely shouldn't be confused with a lack of bias for action. I think, because for me, actually, bias for action is really important. So is excellence. So it's definitely, patience isn't about allowing people to get away with things, I suppose, or being too soft on them. I think my team and the people I work with will definitely tell you that I have a very strong bias for action, and I expect a lot, and I will challenge them and I will ask questions. But if you can do it in a way that shows that you're respecting them, you have some patience for it, and that if they make a mistake, you're willing to support them with that and forgive them for it, then I think that's where it comes in.
Nice. And how has that developed in you over your career? Because obviously there's a deep influence from your dad originally of, I want to be like that.
Yes, true.
But where has this developed throughout your career? What are the key moments where this has shown up?
I've had the pleasure of having excellent bosses and managers throughout my career, and I've had ones that are probably similar to me and also ones that are so wildly different. And from each of those experiences, I have learned something from it. And I think from the ones that are similar to me, they've actually recognized themselves in me and then pushed me to almost become, really reach out to mentors who are very different to me and get a different perspective, and that's been helpful. And I've also had managers who are very wildly different, and I've seen the parts of them that I really want to grab onto and develop, and I've seen the parts that I'm like, I don't think that's for me and that's not my style. So I think I'm someone who really likes to observe and learn in people, and so I might not have started out probably as the best people leader, but I have quite a strong learning agility, I think, in that space, and I've observed what works and what doesn't work, and I think that's what's helped me to get where I am now.
What are the biggest things you've learned from other people?
Gosh, that's a big question.
It is. I said it so directly as well.
From the people that, what are the biggest things I've learned from people? I think that you can push too hard with people and start to get them to pull away. And I think that you can not push hard enough and you won't get what you need out of the team and they won't respect you. So I think probably what I've learned the most is the Goldilocks zone, I suppose, of leadership in terms of how you make people feel like you're really on the ball. They're not going to be able to get anything past you, but that you're not setting up an environment where people feel like they're scared to go in and talk to you or present to you, or they have to have dotted every I and crossed every T in order to get in front of you, because they've probably wasted about 10 hours of their energy they could have been focused on something else.
I think that's really good insight. I always do a leadership program, and the first question is like a kick-off icebreaker, and I'm like, what have you learned from the worst leader you've ever worked with? And the crowd always go kind of wild at that one, and then it's like the best one, and you ask what have you learned from the best leader you've ever worked with, and the faces kind of soften, and it's so interesting. Like I even saw that kind of physical reaction in you there when I asked you that question of like, all the memories.
Yes. Yeah.
The memories of going back. Tell me a little bit about you. I feel like I really want to dig into who you are as a person and your career and your personal life as much as you're willing to share. Like if you were going to describe yourself and celebrate yourself, what would you say?
Ooh, describe myself and celebrate myself. I think where do I start? I think I grew up in a very, probably I'd say quite a normal family, but I had some experiences when I was young that I think shaped me a lot. So one thing is I did gymnastics for quite a few years, quite seriously, quite competitively, to the point where as a young teen I was 6 days a week I was going to gymnastics, and it kind of filled my time and everything I focused on. And I think I got a lot out of that because it's actually quite a tough sport. It's very individual, and you have to almost really at a young age work out how to motivate yourself and have quite a bit of resilience, because you often have very strong coaches who are pushing you to do very tough things, and you have to find that inner strength to be able to do scary things all the time. And if I reflect on that, I think that as hard as it was, it taught me, one, that I can do things that are hard and that I don't think I can do, but two, that I can handle also not being the best at things and still do them, if that makes sense. Like I competed at a Australia level, but I wasn't the best in my team at all. And so interestingly, you find a way to navigate through that, and you can actually, sometimes I think it can be best not to be the best at something and still find a way to keep doing it, because I think it teaches you that you can still have value in that space, and you may be more likely to try things down the track even if you're not going to be the best.
I think there's something so interesting in that, because I don't think, this sounds really self-critical, but like I don't think I was ever the best at anything, but I think that actually served me quite well. And hearing you say that, you're making me reflect on my own history of like, yeah, there's comfort in kind of going, I love your language around still add value. I'm still going to do this and enjoy the experience. I had Imogen Hewitt on today, also just before we were in the studio together, and she was talking about her need to get that external validation and the need to kind of like always be at the top of her game and be the best to some extent. And it's interesting hearing the difference between the two of you, because she actually, I think she said she was a figure skater or something along those lines, and she was like that competitive edge. The impact that sport as a child clearly has on all of us. Massive. When you think about how that sportsmanship has impacted your career, how does that show up for you now?
I think that element of being able to compete and focus and really bring some excellence to something has really stuck with me, because I've had it from the young age. But then the element of potentially not being the best has also given me, maybe I don't need as much external validation of things because I haven't been used to it. I haven't been used to being, at the absolute top of the game, and I'm okay probably putting myself out there, trying new things, potentially getting there, but it's probably not my goal that I have to be there, if that makes sense.
I love that. I find that very interesting. All right, so we're digging into you. There's the gymnastics history. What else do we need to know?
Good question. So I think I moved around a lot as a young person as well, and I think, again, that's enabled me. I think I went to 4 primary schools in the first while I was in primary school, and so every year and a half we moved. And at the time, I probably look back on it with my own kids and I think, wow, that's a lot of movement. How did I manage that? But I think it's actually given me the ability to pick up and start again all the time with people. Like, I'm not scared to go into a new group of people and try and make friends again, because I did it every year, throughout primary school. And I think that that's something that I didn't recognize was actually a strength until my husband and I went overseas and we moved to Canada when we just got married, and I seemed to find the whole thing completely normal and easy. And then he looks back on it now and he goes, I found myself reading books almost more than I ever had when I was in Canada. And he read something that said that's a sign of homesickness. It's almost like you're continuing to try and break out of the area you're in and find something comforting. And so until I saw that in other people, I didn't recognize that that's something that allows me to start new things and come into new situations and feel comfortable. So that's something I've reflected on that's interesting.
One of the things this podcast has taught me about speaking to parents, they're so worried about like, oh, I made my kids move several times, or, the different challenges that come along with life. Yes. And every single woman that has sat beside me has spoke about how those challenges have shaped them in such a positive way. And if I think of all the working mums out there right now, or, mums just doing their very best, worrying about the things where they don't seem like things are perfect, or they're not doing it right, or they're creating too much change in their child's life, or however they want to frame it, are actually the things that are going to form them into resilient and hardworking and, gutsy kind of kids that are like going out there in the real world when it comes to being adults. And that's been such a key theme for me throughout this. And you're kind of really bringing that to the surface right now.
You have to give your kids some tough experiences. None of us naturally want to, because you just want to protect them and keep them safe and have this magical life. But I think that you need to, or else they'll suddenly be 18, they'll be out in the world and they just won't understand what the world's really like. So I think I've definitely felt that myself. You start to think, no, I don't want to move them overseas or whatever it is. But I don't think it should be because you're worried about what it means for the kids, because I think they're incredibly adaptable. They'll get something amazing out of it and they'll probably surprise you.
It's that guilt that people have as they're going through the journey, and if only they could reframe that in terms of like, no, this is going to be what makes them and forms them, you'd view it so differently. It's just that reframe, right, of like, no, it's character building, but to your point, there's that guilt around
Yes. I've had to reframe as being someone who works full time. My husband also works full time. I'm around for my kids as much as I possibly can be, and I try and work that into my schedule. But I had to reframe almost. Some people are like, "Oh, you work full time. Are you, around enough? Do you spend enough time with your kids?" And one of the things that's really helped me with that is I do have a 9-year-old boy. And I think it's really important as a parent, or one of the things I can bring to him is to demonstrate the role a woman can actually have in the household, can be as a worker. And it's created an environment where my husband and I have a very even split of the workload at home. And I don't think that would happen if I wasn't a full-time worker. And I think it's helping to send him a signal that, I should be expected when I grow up, whatever relationship I'm in or whatever partnership, that a male actually leans in and does that, and a female can work, and that could be important to the household. And so things like those reframings have really helped me feel more comfortable about my decisions, because it can actually build your children in a different way.
And not even more comfortable, like proud, right?
Proud,
like, yeah,
yes.
like there's that kind
Yes.
of, I'm proud of what I'm doing and what I'm demonstrating. And to your point earlier, there's no right or wrong,
Yes.
right? Like if I think of my childhood, I'd say up until the age of 18, I was wrapped in cotton wool. So like, if someone died, I didn't know. Like it was a very kind of like, everything's perfect. Don't look over here.
Yeah.
And then at 18, my parents broke up, and then there was a cascade of different things that happened over the next kind of 10 years from there, I'd say. And I wasn't equipped to deal with it, not in the way that I fell apart. I'm completely oversharing with you here, but not in the way that I fell apart, but just in terms of going back to that emotional regulation. I didn't know that it wasn't okay to not be okay. So I just would continue to carry on and smile and kind of do the same, like, don't look over here, I'm fine, everything's going really well, smile through it. And it was only a couple of years ago when I learned about emotional regulation and the importance of like letting go and crying and all of that. I had to learn it in my 30s because I didn't learn it as a kid.
And I think it's a lot to do with what's happened in the world over the last 10 years as well. The permissibility and the understanding to have those conversations just weren't there when you were 18, right? No one was talking about it. And now people are, which is great.
Yeah, which is so good. All right, so we're going back to you. So we've got the gymnast, we've got the child who moved around a lot, we've got the proud working mum who's just like smashing it and showing her son exactly what it means to be a woman, which I love. Reveal some more. Let's take some onion layers off.
Onion layers. I'd say something less exciting or has been harder in my life over the last few years is I had cancer, which was something that surprised me. I didn't think I'd be 38 years old or whatever I was and have cancer, because it's just not the picture I thought I would have of myself, which has been hard, but luckily I'm in a good position now, which is great. But I'd say it's given me, it definitely threw me in the deep end and made me question some things quite significantly. I remember finding out about having cancer, and I had to tell people, and that was really hard. But I found it actually quite easy to tell my husband and quite easy to tell my parents, which you'd think would be quite challenging, maybe because you're so close to them and they're already understanding and seeing you go on medical tests and things like that. And my mum had cancer as well. But the time that I found absolutely crushed me and I completely burst into tears and I lost all my emotional regulation was when I told my boss, which was interesting. And I've thought a bit about why. I was like, why was that such a tough moment, or why did I lose it then, I think. And I think it's got to do with the fact that I tied a fair bit, and still do, I tie a fair bit of my identity in work and who I am at work, and being quite, I guess, a strong leader and almost owning the narrative in the business of who I am. And I knew at that moment it would change things forever, and I was worried about becoming the person forever that had cancer as opposed to any of the other things that I'd achieved, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That must have been the most confronting part of your life, to have those conversations, and at a time when you probably didn't really know what it meant. Would I be right in saying
you don't
that?
know whether this is the beginning of something that's going to be a very long journey or you know, or it's not, or how far it's going to go, or how hard it's going to be. You just don't know at that point.
What did you need from people in that moment of life?
I needed time to reflect and understand what it meant to me. And then, funnily enough, I actually, after I told my boss, I then decided to tell almost pretty much everyone in my team, both my peers and my reports, and individually about the news. And it was hard to do, but I actually found that the more I did it, the more I could talk about it. Just like anything, it was almost like it took a little bit of the power out of it, because you were able to talk about it and share it each time, and you know, see that everyone was supporting of you and hadn't changed their view of you, I think, in a little bit of a way too. So I think what I needed from people was for them to support me, but then not have it define me.
What you've said around owning the narrative, can we dig into that a little bit?
What did I say?
You just said, in terms of like being at work, you had I'm going to butcher your words, but this was basically what you said, that you were owning, your identity was very much linked to work.
Yes.
And you wanted to make sure that you wasn't seen in a particular way afterwards. And I understand that deeply. Like, I think that it's like a label with anything, not that cancer's a label, but there's associations with it, right? That is just, wow, this is big and this is heavy. And it's such a thing that I think so many people can relate to, and everyone brings their own kind of story around what that word means. It's kind of like the scariest word in the dictionary, isn't it, really? And you were talking about, like, previously you'd owned the narrative at work in terms of who you are, and then I think what you were saying was that you didn't really have access to the stories and everything that people were going to associate with that. Is that correct?
Yes, I think I thought that it might signal that I was weaker, I suppose, in some ways. Almost that, you know, I was seen as someone who was quite strong and able to move forward within a work capacity. And I think it, as irrational as it is, I thought it might make me appear weaker.
I don't want to over ask you. If I overstep the mark, please do tell me. But what was that like? Because that narrative, like, you've obviously got, if I think of like the reality of that, you've got the weight of the C word hanging over you, and then you're worrying about how it makes you look.
Yeah. I know, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. No. I don't even think it's weird. I think it's the reality of humanity. But I just trying to understand that moment for you.
It's true, isn't it? I think that you still have, just because something major happens in your life doesn't mean that all the things that were important to you before suddenly drop off entirely.
Yeah, it's a great lesson.
It's almost like you still had this picture of yourself into the future. We all carry forward a picture and we think we know what's going to happen, and then something comes in, and sometimes it changes things so massively, and sometimes it has you just trying to adjust, I think, and that's what I was doing. So I think I had both happen at that point in time. I had some things where I was trying to hold on to my view of myself, and the view forward just looked so different. I didn't exactly know how to compute it. And then there were some other things that it helped become ridiculously clear. So I remember having the thought, probably within the first day, really thinking about the future and stepping out of things like work, which probably weren't that important, and then realizing to myself, oh my gosh, I just really hope that I can be around for my kids long enough for them to get through their most formative years. At the time, I think they were 3 and 6, and I was just like, the thing here is I just really want them to have a mum for the time that you really need to have a mum. You know, I really love to get them to 18, essentially. And when that piece came into my mind, that gave me a lot of clarity, and it's really helped me beyond cancer, or now even, you know, at a time when I'm in remission, because it tells you that when you're absolutely thinking about the future, that's the most important thing. And so it's helped me to definitely validate that spending time with the kids and allowing them to have a mum is still the most important thing, whether I'm working or not.
I've just written down the word, and it's the wrong word, so I'm not going to say it. But how do you feel about that experience now?
I feel like it was hard, but I think it's like anything. your life throws you hard things. It throws everyone different hard things, and then you learn something from it, and your job is to work through it and hopefully be a better person on the other side. So I see it as just one of the challenges I was thrown amongst all the different ones everyone was thrown.
Yeah. And apart from the desire, because I'm so intrigued on this, apart from the desire to be like the most present mum, which is what I've kind of heard from your language, what else did you learn from that experience? And I'm sorry if it's inappropriate to call experience. Like, what do you even say? Do you know? Like, I'm treading very carefully here, but also probably saying the wrong thing. But like, yeah, it's huge. What did you learn from it?
I learned that actually you need to give other people more credit a little bit with, in having these thoughts. Like, people will just think that cancer is the only thing they can think about when they think of me going forward. I don't think I was giving everyone else enough credit. Like, I'm a diverse person. I have many things to bring to the table, and it's not just my medical situation. So I learned that significantly as well, is that people can perceive a lot more than you necessarily think you are. And the idea or the story you're telling yourself is really limited. And you've got to get out of that and really give people more credit.
I love that, the story you're telling yourself. That's interesting. You've made me have a realization, which is probably why I'm over digging on this, because I probably told you about the heart attack that I had back in 2018, and I went straight back to work after that. So I had the heart attack. I found out while I was in hospital that my dad had prostate cancer. So I've got the ECG on, like,
oh my gosh,
I was going to say mic'd up. I'm so used to being mic'd up these days. But I had the ECG on me.
That'd be a cool way to call it in the medical world. I'm going to mic you up right now.
I'm going to mic you up. But I remember, like, I didn't tell my parents because I was like, they're on the other side of the world. I do not want them to know what's going on here. So Dad FaceTimes me on like day 4 of me being in hospital, and he had to have the conversation with me that you had to have, so you can kind of understand the situation that's going on here. I'm pretending that I'm not in hospital and that I've just popped in for like a routine checkup, but I'm clearly in a gown. I've got the monitor there measuring my heart. And I remember Dad telling me, and I couldn't face the conversation, so I kind of jumped off and everything. Anyway, that was on the Friday. I got taken out of the hospital on the Saturday, and I remember messaging work and being like, I'm going back to work, like, absolutely, I'll see you Monday. And they were like, whoa, easy, Tiger, you're not going back to work.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And up until this moment in the studio with you right now, I've always thought that I went back to work because I was super resilient and like able to overcome it. And I wrote down the word weak when you said that. And I thought, fuck, like, she's right. Like, without realising it.
You didn't want anyone to know.
I didn't want to look weak. And up until today, I've worn that as a badge of honour, that I went back to work. And you've just unlocked that insight for me, actually, that if I'm really honest with myself, that was why I went back. So I'm sure you've unlocked that something similar by sharing that story so honestly and openly. So thank you.
And I completely understand it, because I think I probably would have had that tendency as well. And probably, if I had a way out of it, of not telling people I had cancer or whatever it was, I probably would have tried to do that. So I can completely understand it.
Yeah. Isn't that sad, though, that like that's the last thing people would have been thinking.
But it's the first, it's the narrative you think is everything.
Yeah, it's the narrative that we create in our own heads. Like, that's so fascinating. You also use the word beyond cancer, life beyond cancer. What have you taken with you, like, into this new chapter of your life? And I say that as someone who, when I was sitting there with the ECG and they're going, we've ruled out anything immediately life-threatening, but we're gonna have to wait and see what's next. I remember sitting there thinking, I'm going to change my whole life off the back of this. And you don't quite do that, do you? It's interesting. What has been your experience?
I think in a lot of ways it validated that I am quite happy with the life I have, if that makes sense, because I didn't try and drop everything and change it completely. If I really hated everything I was doing, I think I would have. I really like my job. I really like my husband. I really like my family. I feel like I'm happy with a lot of the major decisions I've made. So I think it validated that. And then I think it also made me, in some ways, a little bit less scared of these things happening. I know it sounds very weird. I obviously don't want it to happen again or for it to continue, but I think it took a little bit of the power out of it, because you're like, okay, I can get through this. It's okay. I can, tough things can happen, and doesn't mean the entire world has to change or fall out of the bottom, falls out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story so honestly, because it's something that impacts so many people. And I think what you've done really beautifully is give people a really honest and rare understanding into how that person can be feeling. Because I think pre this conversation, I don't think I ever would have thought that would have been a main concern on people's minds. Like, do I look weak in this situation? Like, it happened to me and I didn't even realize I was doing it. That's how insightful you've been and how honest you've been. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to switch the tone, because I also am really conscious that you said this isn't who I want to be and what I want to be known for. So we're gonna I'm not disrespecting it by parking it, but I think that, to your point, there's so many other things that we can be discussing about you and who you are. I'd like to discuss your leadership style, and how you show up at work. And I'm going to use the phrase which might make you feel uncomfortable. Why do people love working with you?
And interestingly, you say, why do people love working with you? I've been thinking a lot recently about the concept of, I just had a blank. What does everyone call themselves, say they have all the time? Imposter syndrome.
Yes.
The concept of imposter syndrome. And probably if you asked me 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said, yes, I've got imposter syndrome. And then I've thought about it recently and I'm like, no, I don't have imposter syndrome. The situation with me is a lot more nuanced than that, because I do think I'm good at my job. I do think I deserve to be there. I do think I add a lot of value into the workplace. And I do think that I'm continuing to grow and develop and, embody a lot of the things that I should be in the role. So I believe I have a seat at the table, but I still have anxiety and struggle with certain things. And so I think that I encourage people to think a little bit more deeply about, rather than wrapping everything up and saying every woman has imposter syndrome and doesn't deserve to be there, really have a think about which things do you think you're really good at and actually have a seat at the table, and which things are you still developing. And for me, I'm still developing the ability to have an external presence. I still get very nervous about going out and speaking on a panel, or, my first intuition with things like this, or even this podcast, was, oh, no, I don't want to do that. And then again, it's that emotional response, and then the rational response comes in and go, no, you should absolutely do that. That's a great opportunity. Try something new. What's the worst that can happen? Give it a go. And usually I can override it quite well and be like, nope, you're saying yes, and then just see what happens. And so I think, but I don't recognize that as I shouldn't be there and I don't have interesting things to say and I can't be valuable. I see that as I'm still developing in that space and I'm still getting used to it, and I just need more practice at it. So interestingly, I've recently tried to reshape my view on what imposter syndrome actually is, and, how I see myself. And I think I can build my confidence by reframing these things.
So am I right in saying your takeout on this is like, actually, it's not about not being good enough or not being ready for these things. It's about just saying, I haven't tried that before, and therefore I need to build new habits and new skills in this area.
Yes, I'm not an expert yet. I haven't had the same experience necessarily that the people that you see who are amazing at this have. Some of it's skill-based and some of it's learning, and I don't think it means that you have to be perfect and you have to always hold yourself to the most amazing people. I think, funnily enough, sometimes people, when they look at other people, they judge them almost versus the average or what you would expect, right? And then often when you judge yourself, or certainly with me, I was putting myself against the best person I've ever seen do that skill. And if you're doing that against every single skill that ever exists, of course you're not going to be the best person, and you're going to think that you're not actually good at any of them. So really reframing that and going, am I as good as you would expect at this, or am I even better than you expect at this? Yes, actually I am. But yes, there's some amazing people that are even stronger, and I can learn from them, and I can potentially build to that. But I don't also have to be perfect and great at everything.
That's what's been so interesting about this podcast, because everyone who comes on, everyone says, are you sure you want me? I'm not good enough. I've had some women that like have literally had requests to have them on. I've reached out to them and said, hey, will you be on my podcast? And they're like, no, I'm not as good as the other people. And I'm like, sorry, the other people were the ones that requested you. Will you do it? And they'll be like, oh, and I'll have to have like an initial call with them just to convince them that this is like okay to do.
Yes.
And then they're like, oh, okay, I'm in. And it's not through lack of wanting to do it, it's just that fear of like, I'm not as good as everyone else. Which is what I'm really loving about kind of like stripping back those layers with everyone here. And it's like, well, actually you all feel the same, so so let's just take some comfort in that.
That's right. And what's the worst that can happen if you're not that great at it? It's okay too. You can forgive yourself for that and try something else.
I think with this though, I don't think you can be bad at it, because I think there's an element of going, you are here to be yourself. Like the whole point of this podcast is come along, be yourself. Like, and don't get me wrong, to challenge my own challenge, some people struggle to be themselves. But I think like on a whole, it's just like, come and be you and share your life experience and your views and like what people can learn from you. And there's no more to it than that. But I find it so fascinating that for everyone, that is the most difficult part. Like I had Melissa Doyle was the first cab off the rank, right? She is like an absolute legend, like off camera, on camera. She just knows her stuff. And before it went live, she was texting me like, Chloe, I'm so nervous about this going live. And I'm thinking, but you're on TV all the time. Like
you'd be the last person you would expect. Someone who's been on live TV for years.
And she was like, but Chloe, this is talking about myself. So I'm completely contradicting what I'm saying, but I do think there's like an element where this should be easy and it should be just a case of coming and talking about you, but it's the thing that makes it so difficult for everyone. It's like that seesaw feeling. In terms of what success looks like for you, if this is one of your first podcasts, getting yourself out there, self-promotion, making sure, you know, you're putting yourself out there, what would like success look like for you when you walked out of here today? What would you want to have achieved?
I'd want to have achieved that I've added value to people, that I've shared something that they connect with, or that they helps them rethink about something. I think it's, you know, if you're going to spend some time listening to something, you want to get something out of it. So I think if I could feel like I've impacted anyone, that would be great.
Amazing. And what do you think that, what in terms of what you would like to share with that as the framing, what would you like to share? What would your key message for people be?
My key message would be to, one, have some more faith in yourself. Like really have a think about, are you actually good at some things? Really layer up what you think about yourself and have some more faith in yourself. And two, to think about going forward, I suppose, in your life, any of the things that you are trying to refine or you want to do better, you want to change, almost what we spoke about at the beginning. How do you keep all the things that make you amazing and then add to them, rather than feel like you're constantly having to dull something down to make something stronger, or you're losing something to lean into something else? Almost take all the things that make you great and then continue to build other skills around it.
And a lot of that is within mindset, right? Like, it's to your point, we do sometimes feel like we have to sacrifice something to become a different else. To tap into a different part of us. We started talking about this off mic, but I'm going to go there now on mic. You said you went to the ADMA conference recently and was learning about mindset, and I am obsessed with mindset. So anything you can teach me in that area, please go ahead.
The ADMA conference was excellent, and actually Todd Sampson was the keynote speaker at the end. And I knew him from his advertising industry work and what, being on Gruen, etc. And I've always thought he was a really interesting guy, but I actually thought he was sensational in what he did at the conference, because he didn't talk about any of that. He talked about how the mind works and how the brain works, and how he'd done all these documentaries over the last 10 years with the, brilliant scientists around the world who knew the most about the brain. And he shared a fair bit of that. And I couldn't remotely share it with the capacity he has, besides to say go and find out what you can from him and watch his documentaries. But he talked about some really valuable stuff. So things like the importance of sleep. I think we've all heard it, but the way he said it, it was absolutely a non-negotiable. It was like if you could give anyone a gift, it would be to have more sleep. Essentially, like just getting a little bit less than 8 hours a night, which I definitely do. I don't get 8 hours a night. I wish I did, but I don't. Your brain capacity reduces by 5% essentially for each hour you don't get. And that all of us are using a drug throughout the day just to get ourselves back to some kind of normality, meaning that our brains just aren't working at the capacity they need to be. And he scoped the whole thing around the idea that you have an ordinary brain. He'd basically done all of these tests and they told him you have an ordinary brain, but there was multiple ways to try and create an extraordinary brain. And a lot of those are in the space of getting the right, starting with the basics, getting the right amount of things like sleep, but then pushing your learning, pushing your creativity, building new connections in the brain that our older brains are a little bit slow at, but young people are so good at. Learning a new language, learning music, all of those things that we find hard, actually building an extraordinary brain if we were to lean into them.
And we need to get off our phones to be able to do that, right? I was at a conference the other day and they shared something which terrified me, which is the amount of time we are spending on our phones a day. Like our screen time, around 6 hours a day, is the equivalent of 2 to 3 alcoholic drinks a day when it comes to brain rot. And I was sitting in the audience and I looked at my screen time and I was like, oh dear, I'm drunk right now. I'm drunk right now. This is really concerning.
And doesn't surprise me. I mean, it is a concern that I've heard of the idea of Google brain, and I think in the future it's probably going to be AI brain, which is that we don't have to search for answers in our brain anymore because we have them in our pocket and in our hand when we need them. And used to be that you're like, oh no, I go to trivia. You're like, oh, I need to find the answer. When you actually do trivia now, it's so hard to find the answer in your brain because you're used to just picking up the phone if you don't know the answer to something and finding it that quickly. And it's exactly the stuff that he's talking about. You need to exercise your brain in hard ways quite consistently and to build that extraordinary brain. Like we all have the capacity to use every element of our brain, but we just aren't doing it all the time.
I was using ChatGPT as my therapist for a while. I was still going to therapy. I'm like therapy's biggest advocate. I'm still going to therapy, but I was using it as my kind of like go-to therapist, and I quit a few weeks ago with that. We've parted ways. Because I just found that I was like becoming reliant on like, oh, okay, like asking it the most stupid basic questions, and I thought this is really concerning. So that's been my quit of the month. And I've also bought one of those bricks. That was the other thing they recommended at this conference, to like attach to your phone to just stop you from being able to like access it at all times, because I'm all for AI. Like it's changing my business, it's changing my life. I'm so excited to be part of this generation that are going to experience it. But I don't want it to take over my ability to think, because my brain is one of the things that I like about myself.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So I really want to make sure that that's not something we become overly reliant on. But I think worryingly, it's just a bit too easy, isn't it? Like it was solving all of my questions around like, you know, relationships and friendships and everything. And it's like,
it's smart.
Yeah.
It's smart. It is. I think any change in technology over the years has its own scary factors, and I think hopefully as a human race we will find the right way through with AI to get it to help us be more innovative, to help us be more creative, to help us access those parts of our brains that are the parts it can't do, and is going to keep stretching us and hopefully give us more development in the brain space than going the other way around. And I think we can, but we need to be thinking of it in that light.
This is where your superpower of patience becomes even more interesting, right? Because it's so rare. Like we're so used to having everything at our fingertips. I think it's definitely added to my inability to be patient in any way, shape or form, because it's like, okay, it's accessible. We've got this now. With that in mind, when it comes to patience, and I've kind of touched on this at the beginning, but I feel like we've gone on a bit of a road with it now. What are your key tips, right? So we spoke about listening. I think your journey and your story of gymnastics and the challenges that have come your way in life, you've developed patience over a long period of time. You mentioned patience with yourself at the beginning that we've not touched on too much. What are your tips for patience with others and patience with yourself?
I think that can actually be a mentally learned skill in a lot of ways. It's having the ability to stop and identify when you're about to fire, almost like you're about to have a response to something that's probably a bit impatient, and identifying it and naming it, almost not naming it out loud necessarily, but naming it in your head and being able to identify it. I actually think that that's 95% of patience, is recognizing when you're about to not do it and be able to stop and go, hang on a second, let me think about that again and let me recompute. So it might sound a little bit basic, and I know it's very hard to do, but I actually think most of it is identification.
Okay, I'm going to set myself a challenge this week in your honour. And every time I catch myself being impatient, which is multiple times a day, I'm going to name it and then see if I can slow down, and I'll let you know if it works.
You can be a live example and see if it works, or whether I'm completely off topic, and you can tell me. But yeah, it'd be great to see.
I don't think, as much as I know I'm impatient, I'm definitely not the only one. There'll be lots of people listening into this thinking, patience. Like, do I even have the patience to listen to this? Yes. It's like, oh, get me there. I've got this like physical reaction to it. At the end of every episode, we ask who your limitless woman is that you would like to celebrate. So over to you.
Limitless woman I'd like to celebrate. The person that comes to mind for me is, her name's Ali Lung. She was my manager when I was in Canada, and she gave me two amazing things. One, she showed incredible humanity. I think when I moved to Canada, me and my husband, we just got married, moved to Canada, and she picked us up at the airport. She didn't need to do that as a new manager. I could have just seen her on Monday at work. She could have shook my hand and said, "Hi, I'm your new manager." But she drove out to the airport in Toronto. She picked up me and my husband at the airport. She took us out to dinner. And it was exactly an example of her leadership in general. She was incredibly humanistic and incredibly smart and lovely, and I still see her as a benchmark. I think she came into my life in my mid-20s, and I think that was the perfect time to have someone like her as a leader to show what I wanted to become, just as I was starting to lead people, which I think is great. And the other thing she gave me is feedback. So previously I'd been in the business I was in for 4 or 5 years. I'd started as a grad, and I think I'd never been the person who was much of a problem, if that makes sense. I was doing a pretty good job. I was getting good feedback. So when I would have my performance reviews, it was like, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. That's excellent, etc. And then I got to Canada, and my first performance review, she was like, "You're doing well. Here's some things to work on. Here's some things." She one of the key examples she gave me is like, "We hear you've got a lot of good things to say, but you won't ever take the floor. You wait for someone to ask you, why don't you step up and take the spotlight?" And I remember my first reaction, having not gotten any real feedback before, was like, oh my God, mind blown. Where do I go with this? I'm not used to actually having to work on something, if that makes sense. And then my next reaction was like, oh no, I will do this. And I found so interestingly, once she gave me feedback and once I got over the shock of having feedback, I then was immediately like, I'm going to show that I can do this. Okay. And she also challenged me, the next time our CEO comes to town, I want you to ask a question. I want you to stand up in front of the whole town hall of 500 people and put your hand up and ask a question. And both of those pieces of feedback, you know, one, I started to take the floor more readily in general. And of course, as soon as that CEO was in town and as soon as they said, anyone got any questions, bang, my hand goes up, right?
Yeah.
And then the next time, the next visitor came to town, she hadn't asked me to do it, but bang, my hand went up again. And I was like, okay, this is what I do now. I ask questions. And I never would have done it if she hadn't given me the feedback. And then funnily enough, I started to get a reputation in the business. I remember someone saying to me, like, oh, you always ask questions, or you always do this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've completely flipped the narrative just by putting my hand up 2 or 3 times. And I think she gave me 2 things out of that. One, an understanding of the power of feedback. I tell my team, anyone who reports to me now, I say, you will get feedback. I tell them that early on before I have the feedback, because it takes sort of the like, oh, you've got feedback for you. No, it's more like my commitment to you is that I will make sure I give you feedback, because until any of us have absolutely taken over the entire world and are perfect, which is never going to happen, there's always something we could be working on to get towards our future goals. So she gave me the power of that, and so that I could share it with other people and feel more comfortable doing that. Like I feel really comfortable giving feedback now. And she also gave me the gift of knowing that I can change the narrative with a few key actions. Like even the perception of myself, I could change that just by being more conscious of it. So I think, yeah, she's someone that I think I got really amazing things out of, both as a person and as a leader.
I just got loads from that as well, so thank you. Thank you very much. Such great points. Thank you so much for taking the time. Well done for putting yourself out there and like putting your hand up again, I guess, to be here and to do this. Thank you for being so honest. Thank you for being raw, and thank you for being so patient. Appreciate you.
And thank you for a wonderful conversation.